If you're leading a growing business, compliance isn't just an HR problem, it's a leadership and a total business problem. Now, no one likes talking about compliance, but it is an essential piece of running a business of any size. Today, we're going to demystify what compliance risk actually means and where you need to focus your attention to stay out of compliance hot water. Compliance is a risk to your financial stability, to your reputation in the marketplace for both business and employees, and is something that you just simply cannot ignore. The most grating thing about compliance management is that it's constantly changing, especially in the labor market. You have federal regulations, state regulations, county regulations, city regulations. There's so much to keep up with, and you simply cannot take your eye off the ball. Compliance risk is one of those things that you could risk it, not pay attention, even selectively choose things that you're going to comply with or not going to comply with. But that's kind of like ignoring a leak in your boat. Eventually it's going to fill with water, it's going to sink, and you're not going to be in such a great place. Ignoring compliance can be a lot more expensive than you think. Recent research shows that companies of all sizes, when averaged out, spend about $14.8, that's $15 million a year on non-compliance issues. That's a 45% increase since 2011. Beyond fines, companies suffer a 30% loss in value due to reputational damage from non-compliance. In fact, in 2023, 48% of companies experienced some sort of regulatory proceeding, and 41% called it one of their biggest litigation concerns. So if you're a CEO or a founder or an investor in a new organization, compliance is one of those things that you just simply can't ignore. So let's talk about 4 common compliance gaps that small and medium-sized businesses encounter and what you can do to avoid them. Issue number 1 is the misclassification of people. I'm talking about the misclassification of a person as to whether they are an employee or a contractor. Determining whether someone is a contractor or an employee is relatively easy intuitively. It's determining whether that individual is getting most of their income from you or if they're getting it from multiple sources. If they're getting it mostly from you, then they are essentially considered an employee. If they are getting it from multiple sources, other clients, then they're more likely a contractor. And you may not care about this because you're not the IRS, but because of misclassification issues, the IRS experiences about an $8 billion loss per year in tax revenue because of misclassification issues. The second issue is multi-state regulations. So as you expand and grow, you start hiring one-off employees in this state or another state, and every single state has different types of regulations. Some states are heavily regulated, some have next to no regulations, but it is your job to know what the regulations are for the state and where in which that employee is actually working, because those are the regulations that apply to that employee. So simply hiring somebody in Louisiana doesn't mean that you just hire them and carry on. You need to understand exactly what you're responsible for as an employer, having someone working in the state of Louisiana. The third gap is record keeping, and this is especially important because as you grow, your HR software systems probably change a few times. You start out with a low-cost provider, you shift to something mid-market, and then eventually go to kind of an enterprise provider, and a lot of data needs to carry over from one system to the next. The federal government, some states have different regulations about how long you need to keep records about certain aspects of employment, how long you need to keep payroll records, how long you need to keep disciplinary records, records about performance that led to some sort of adverse employment decision. You need to be aware of every single state's regulations about record keeping and record retention where you operate. The fourth gap, and probably the bane of most founder CEOs' existence, are employee handbooks and policies. Now let me be the first one to tell you, there's absolutely no regulation, federal, state, or otherwise, that requires you to have an employee handbook. But it is very common to have one because you want to have all your policies consolidated in one space. You can have your employees acknowledge it, which means that they are responsible for knowing the contents, the rules and regulations contained within it. If you choose not to have a handbook, you still have to issue policies, you have to share regulations related to employment with those employees. You can't rely on your employees to know every employment regulation that applies to them. For example, you have different types of paid leave in different types of states. You can't withhold that information. As the employer, it's your responsibility to let employees know what they are entitled to. You can't play dumb to it and not let them know and just hope that the expense that you're probably going to encounter can be avoided, because it simply cannot. If you have a handbook, the bar is much, much higher in what you must communicate with your employees and share with them as it relates to their employment with you. So how do you manage compliance in such a volatile, uncertain world? Well, the first thing is that you just need to embed it in your culture. Either you're gonna play by the rules or you're not. Now, as I said before, there are all sorts of things that you can choose not to comply with, and you'll probably be fine with it. You'll never be audited, no one will ever know. You won't start complying with it until you perhaps become a certain size and the risk significantly goes up. And you know what? That's your choice. But always know that you're running the risk of some sort of audit on any given day. Some regulatory agency could show up at your office and want to look at records, and if you don't have them lined up, you're going to be in a sticky situation that's going to cost you money, and it's certainly going to cost you time. It's going to cost you money in terms of fines and penalties and legal expenses. And by the way, if you are ever in a regulatory issue where you've been paying people inappropriately, you have no insurance to cover that. Your employment practices and liability insurance may cover your legal fees, but they will not cover damages due to pay issues. You'll have to pay the damages and the back pay if that's a part of the issue. The second thing to remember is that compliance isn't just isolated to HR. Every division, HR and finance especially, have their own regulations and compliance issues to look after. Someone has to be responsible for this. So whether you are the type of organization where you want to keep everything in-house, if you're going to do that, you need to have someone on your HR team or even a third-party outside consultant who's responsible for building out your compliance plan, making sure you're compliant, helping you to become compliant if you're not. Someone has to be responsible for it, because if someone isn't responsible for it, then you're in the situation of not knowing what you don't know, and you find out 5 years later that you're supposed to be doing something very, very significant that you haven't been, and all of a sudden your risk goes from 0 to 1,000. So always make sure someone is responsible and accountable for these compliance issues. The next thing is to just standardize processes. Everything that you can make standardize and rinse and repeat, do it. Things like employee onboarding, employee offboarding, how you manage record keeping for performance matters or for hiring decisions. Take the idea of a paper checklist, put it into a project management system so that you know that every step is being taken and every box is being ticked. Next is a risk audit. Any good company that has time and foresight is going to regularly analyze and audit their risk to begin with, whether it's human resources or accounting and finance. You always need to look, because the more complacent you become just by being in the grind of the day-to-day work, the more likely regulatory things are going to sneak up on you. But if you're not intentionally looking for updates by subscribing to a trade publication or a legal resource, or even having an attorney on a retainer who will send you updates as part of your retainer agreement, you need to have a way of always auditing your compliance and knowing where you stand and what you need to adjust. And lastly, especially when it comes to people and HR matters, you need to train and educate all of your people leaders. Your managers and supervisors need to know the ins and the outs of the Americans with Disabilities Act, because if you have an employee who has some sort of disability, whether it's temporary or ongoing, that is impeding their ability to work, if the manager observes it and sees it, that is technically considered notice. They know that there is a problem and they need to take action to address it by approaching the employee, having a conversation, and taking it from there. And of course, if the employee comes to the manager with a request for an accommodation because they can't perform the essential functions of their job, the manager needs to know what to do and how to handle it so that the employee is not only treated in a compliant way, but also in a very human fashion. So at the end of the day, compliance is about culture. Do you want to be the type of company that follows the rules and plays by the rules? Do you want to be the kind of company that just ignores the rules until you absolutely have to? Or do you want to find some space in the middle? I'm not here to tell you exactly what you should do, but I am sharing with you what will happen if you are very compliant versus being completely non-compliant, and then in between. If the idea of compliance is something that you're thinking about or it's overwhelming, click the link in the video description to schedule a consultation with me. I'd be happy to talk with you about it. No strings. I'm here for you. If you haven't already, I encourage you, and I would really appreciate it if you would click subscribe and follow my channel. Watch the videos, give me your comments and your thumbs up. Tell me what you'd like to hear. I really want to put content out that you are interested in learning and knowing as a business person, as a business leader. I'm here for you. Let me know what you're looking for. Have a great day.